Someone comes to you and they're just explaining themselves to you or something very small and very tiny. You'll be like, why is she or he explaining that to me? It becomes uncomfortable at first. Some people use it as a survival strategy. This is when you reach a point where you don't value yourself. This pattern matters for you as you go forward in life. Marhaba and how's it going, everyone? And welcome back to Yuwab, where we share with you the skills you require to thrive in this abnormal world so that you can live with intention and also purpose. I'm your host, Saeed Alghafri, and I'm truly grateful that you're spending this time with me. I really want to see you grow in this life, and that's why I do this podcast. Before we start this episode, please share this episode and subscribe to my channels. And as you listen to me right now, rate my show in Apple Podcast and Spotify. Let's start with today's episode. Can you recall the last time you were explaining yourself to someone? Not in a way where you're basically introducing yourself, but for something that you've done. It could be a simple thing. And I'm not talking about a mistake or something significantly wrong that you have done. Or maybe you're listening to someone. Someone comes to you and they're just explaining themselves to you for something very small and very tiny. And you'll be like, why is she or he explaining that to me? Why are they going through that exhaustion for them to explain to me what's really happening with them? But they're just trying to explain to you and justify for you something very tiny. That's what we're going to touch on today. And this is very much a deep conversation. Sometimes it becomes uncomfortable at first. I'll tell you why. Because, some people think that when they start justifying to others what they do in life, they feel like they're healed, but that's not the case. Let's dive deep into this. Most people realize how they are exhausted from explaining themselves. Usually that happens after a little bit of time. In the beginning, they feel like, oh, we've achieved that by explaining this specific thing. But over time, they just get exhausted from explaining themselves. Now, you see them explaining why they've done that and how they feel about what they've gone through when they explain that. You see them explaining why they've done this and why they haven't rested and why this happened. And even when they say no, you see them writing a complete newspaper about why basically they're saying no. Now, some people do that because they don't want to hurt some people, or what happens is that when there is a change in what they're supposed to do, you see them explaining a lot actually, because they're just justifying their point of view. Now, at first, it feels a little bit reasonable, and you may feel like you're polite and you're responsible. I know the feeling. I've been there myself in the beginning. But over time, oh my God, this explaining becomes like super automatic. You become automatic. It becomes a habit. And some people use it as a survival strategy. And then you see yourself just explaining yourself and over-justifying yourself to someone which is really not needed. I know some people, and I'm going to share with you later in the episode, they spend the whole night preparing a complete justification, the whole night, on why they want to do this thing. The idea from that is for them to soften the truth and to make it easier to digest. I mean, come on, if it is a crisis or if it is a big story, I can understand. But sometimes people take it to the extreme where they just write a complete justification for something really not necessary. What happens is that when people start explaining themselves, you see themselves wearing the arm guards and start defending. And you're like, why are they doing that? And then they translate that pain in a way where people should feel sorry for them, or they should feel their pain or something like that. Now, some people, without noticing, they begin to live in this specific truth. And over time, it becomes very much a validation of their feelings or their existence or anything they do. Without that recognition or validation, you can't see them really living. You know why this is important? Think about it. For the sake of God, constant explaining and explaining that, over justifying this, justifying that, people think that it's really proper communication. But sometimes that's not even communication, it's just a lot. It's just like you're pouring water into a cup and it's flooding. You don't need that. You may be thinking like, oh, if I don't explain myself enough, I won't be accepted. You know, a lot of people think this way. I don't know why. And you'll be like, you know, if I don't justify my needs, I may be misunderstood. Okay, fine. You're misunderstood. You can explain it. But again, reality is no one said that you're misunderstood. And some people may be thinking like, oh, I need to make more sense to others because I don't deserve it. You know, this is when you reach a point where you don't value yourself. And then for people to deserve your existence, you start explaining more and more and more. And that's not a good point you should reach. My friend, take it easy on yourself. And this is basically what we need to do. And again, think of it as you're breathing. Today, you're just breathing. You don't need to overbreathe or basically not breathe. At the end of the day, you're just living and live that specific moment. Trust me, what will happen over time? It will really drain you. Really, it will really drain you. Imagine that guy who was spending the whole night preparing that justification. And they go to the point where they change the color, they change the font, and going through a lot just to make sure that that justification reaches the person that they want to communicate to. It's not good. It's really, really not good. And honestly, you don't really heal from convincing people. You really heal from trusting yourself. And that's why this pattern matters for you as you go forward in life. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you start reclaiming the trust that you want to have for yourself. Let's put this into some practical examples. Now, let's say you want to say no to a colleague. You're working, let's say you're basically working on a specific project. And this colleague comes to you, and this person is like, oh, can you do this for me? And then you'll be like, you know what? I'm really tired. I want to leave early today, and I've got a lot to do on my plate. And you start apologizing. You'll be like, I'm sorry. I mean, I really want to help, but I can't do that, and I can't do that. You can't really explain your boundaries. It's just all over. And then you're just justifying to that person that you are exhausted and you overshare your pain. Why would you do that? You are just tired. You are busy and you want to leave early. And again, reality is when you are direct with people in a nice, definitely nice way, you don't want to be rude or disrespectful to people. But again, just be direct and be honest with people, because that's when people will understand you better and not misunderstand you when you go through a complete narrative on why you cannot do it. And when you don't agree with them, let's say like that other person doesn't agree with you. Like you tell them no and you explain and they're like, no, I don't agree with you. Imagine how rude of them to say that. But reality, some of them would say that. You would feel anxious and then you would feel really unhappy. And then you will shrink your truth to avoid being questioned. You'll be like, oh, but again, this and that, and that and this, and this and that. And again, another justification is coming. You know what happens? You may be thinking it's clarity, but underneath, you are just draining yourself, my friend. And you don't want that. Again, don't get me wrong. A lot of people get me wrong. I'm not trying to tell you say no to everything in life. Absolutely not. The idea here is don't be rude and be respectful, and don't exaggerate your no. make it specific, and make it very much concise when you want to do that. Let me share with you a few stories. These are stuff that happened to me. I once worked with a lady, a lovely woman, honestly, very respectful, and honestly, hardworking. I remember one time, this lady came to me. The first time that she came to me and she was explaining to me how she works and all this and all that. And she honestly explained to the point where she made a complete presentation. I was very impressed in the beginning. I'm like, whoa, she's coming to me and explaining to me how she wants to work with me. That's awesome, right? But guess what happens? Every time I give her an action, at first, she would basically write it down and then go. You know, in the beginning, I was wondering why she's always late to come to me with that specific action. And I was wondering, maybe she's shy, maybe it's the beginning of us knowing each other. And then the first time she came with a presentation, the second time actually, she came with a presentation and she explained to me the choices that she had for that specific action. And oh my God, that whole idea and presentation was all about emotions and feelings. And it reached a point where she was justifying in an emotional way and left the rational part. You should always balance. And then she was explaining to me and explaining to me and explaining to me. The second time that happened, I was like, okay, fine. Probably she want to have a better alignment. But I wasn't very happy with her attitude. Then what happened? One day she came to me and she did the same like she did the first time. And then the second time. And the third. Always she comes and explains to me. Then I called her one day. And I was telling her, you know that when you do this, this is what happened. You explain a lot, you over-justify, you basically go all emotions. When I say no, you become unhappy and all that. And she's really hardworking. And I enjoy working with her. And then she was like, you know what, Saeed? I just don't want people to misunderstand me. And she left my office. It was like one sentence and she left. And you know what happened? Before she left, she apologized. And I'm like, all right, probably she wanted to go. I called her again in my office. And I'm like, why did you leave? Did I hurt you? Was I disrespectful? And then she explained to me, like, when she does something, she puts her heart into that thing. And when someone speaks back or comment back, she feels very much hurt. And she had the obligation to give you reasons, and she needs the space to come and provide the context. And she doesn't like the idea of someone saying no to her. And then when someone says no to her, it's like she has the obligation to apologize. And that's really not good. Now, we spent a couple times talking about that behavior. And then she realized, like, the less she explains herself, the more people listens to her. And honestly, she didn't want to be more clear like she used to be in the past. That moment, she started basically to realize, like, she doesn't need to defend her feelings. And she became much more powerful and much more resilient from the first time I met her until basically this specific conversation. She became much more calmer and not really guilty. And then ultimately people realized, like, oh, she is basically very much specific, and that's how we should recognize her. And that's when she felt like she discovered herself. And this is very important. Let me share with you another story. This is a guy I coached. This guy is the chief of that specific company. Someone I know from the past, he reached out to me and he was like, Saeed, we basically lose a lot of opportunities in our business. I want you to coach me on that. And I'm like, okay, let's go deep into really what's happening. Now, again, this guy is the chief of that business. So what was really happening, you think? Now, what happens is that when an opportunity comes, you know what happens? This guy basically have the opportunity comes to him, and then he has all the rationale and justification for him to make a decision naturally. So what happens is that this guy spends the whole time seeking opinions, and views. Again, that's awesome. That's really great to do. Now, what happens? Then he takes it to the next level. Now, remember, this is an opportunity, and opportunities are not there to last forever. He basically goes over there and then he starts explaining to everyone why. Now, people explain to you why you should go with this opportunity. Why should you go and explain to them your point of view? Reality is, when you do that, your feelings come into the table. You become much more rational. And you employ resources because naturally you're so busy. You're going to have someone to work with you on whatever you want to tell people on. So you're just wasting time. And that opportunity will not last forever. We went deep, we went deep, we went deep. And then he was realizing, like, listen, Said, if I don't do this, I would be misunderstood. And I want people to understand me better. Look at the reason now. And then he was like, I don't want to upset people. I really don't want to upset people. Underneath all that, because this is basically what he thought. But under all that, honestly, this guy wanted permission. And that's it. He just wanted permission for people to tell him, go ahead. People knew that he would come back with such a behavior and knew eventually, like, by the time he comes, that opportunity is gone. And eventually, no one came with any opportunity. And that's why he reached out to me. Eventually, what we did, he stopped doing that. He wasn't happy in the beginning to stop. The reality is he realized over time, like, he did not have to go through all the explanation and the over-justification. He gained back his focus and he made better decisions. And he got an opportunity, actually, because of that. And honestly, when you think about it, people want direction. They don't want more justification. And this is when opportunity starts to come. Now, let me leave you with 3 key healings that you need to basically cultivate today so that you don't explain yourself so much. The first thing is try to separate between clarity and justification. Now, if you go deep inside into any specific subject, you will see that after seeing all the rationale and justifications, you are equipped to do that decision. You are clear. So having that make you clear into basically making that decision without the need for you to defend yourself. In such situation, a sentence could be like, no, that doesn't work for me. Or probably I need this space. In a nice way, naturally. You don't want to be disrespectful to people. Or you may be like, because of these reasons, I have made my decision and I've decided. Now, there are some instances where someone may be difficult to work with and they would demand more stuff. So what happens with people is that they just rush into a reaction. All you need to do is just pause and ask yourself internally. You should have that internal dialogue. Are you explaining for them to get the validation or to connect with them? If basically you see like it's more about validation, you should just drop it and move on. Because healing begins when you know the difference between validation or basically making the right decision. The second thing is get comfortable with discomfort. Now, not everyone will understand your growth. Honestly, not everyone will understand your path. And not everyone will like your boundaries, honestly. And this is normal in life. And everyone will disagree with your decisions. It's normal. So basically, this is not abnormal. And that's absolutely fine. And this is you, not them. So if you want to do something, that's you, that's your decision, not their decision. So you're comfortable with that. Now, if you're a CEO or if you are a C-suite executive, you are paid to make a decision. You are paid to grow that specific business. So it's important for you to make that decision. You don't need to have everyone's approvals or validation. Discomfort, and honestly, I love discomfort. This specific word, make you grow. I know it's painful and it's challenging, and it's a sign that you're doing something wrong, but it's absolutely not. You're just learning and you're moving on, and you're going to grow a lot in your life. And that's a sign that you're going to do something new in your life. The third thing here is trust yourself and really don't rush a reaction. A lot of people rush a reaction when someone speaks to them. When you stop explaining and you start listening inward, because you need to start analyzing a lot with yourself, whether it's an internal dialogue or on a piece of paper. Trust your intention and trust your timing and trust your needs. When a situation comes when you have a doubt, ask yourself, why are you doubting this? This is a fundamental question. And ask yourself, would I still choose this even if no one agreed? Talk it over and journal about it, because this is the moment when you're going to basically have much more connection with yourself and your healing will deepen into that specific moment. And you're not going to react and you're not going to feel very much guilty. All right? Now, I'd like you to take a moment and reflect on this specific topic and ask yourself, where do you see yourself over-explaining the most? And who's that person who you feel like you're always justifying yourself to them? And what boundaries that you're constantly defending? And what would a small change you would take today to stop over-justifying and trust yourself? I'd like you to write it down because, awareness is the first thing that you need to do when you want to basically tackle any issue. And always remember, healing doesn't really require explanation. It's all about you allowing what you want to change in this specific word without announcing it and without even defending it. Because you don't owe anyone any explanation about what you want to do in this life. Because this is something that means a lot to you and it's basically connected with your purpose. All right? So here is what I want to leave you with today. You really don't need to explain your healing to anyone or justification or your boundaries. You don't need to do that. You don't even need to prove to them your pain, your basically happiness, your growth, your decision. And always remember, the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand you, you create that space for the real you. And that's what you want to do. All right? Don't forget to share this episode because this reminder could be great for someone who's there tired of defending their growth or tired of defending their truth, and it would really change their life. And you never know, you may be the reason for them to thrive in this life. All right? Thank you so much for spending the time with me on Yuwab, and until next time, stay true to yourself. مع السلامة.